there'd be like a real like hockey school scene. Like I know like in BC we've got like the Okanagan. There's it's kind of a destination summer. Would that be kind of down where you're at as well?
Yeah, you have like the Boston Junior Bruins and a lot of like South Shore Kings, Junior Eagles. There's a lot of hockey going around in this area for sure, big time.
Got it. And now you grew up. You went the prep school route, Cushing
Yeah,
Academy, correct?
yeah, yeah. So I just played 1 year at Cushing Academy. I played 4 years at this local high school, which is high school hockey. It's not like Minnesota, but it's pretty good. Like um, back then when I was playing, there was still some really good players, and I was comfortable in the school I was at. So I had two older brothers that went off to prep school, and I just wasn't in a rush. And then I got the opportunity, my younger brother, to go play with him at Cushing. And we had a really really good team, and it was one of the best years of hockey I've been a part of.
And true or false, you were a defenseman.
Yeah, defense. Um,
And were you coached by Ray Bourque at Cushing?
yeah, he was our assistant coach, and
Unreal.
it was unbelievable. Like you learn
How was
so
that?
much. You just learn so much, and you just almost in awe a little bit of he was coaching. So when he walked into the room and he would talk, like all eyes and total focus would be on him. And he wasn't that far off from playing. I mean, this was 2006, so he was not far off from playing. So he'd be on the ice and he could still skate and like he was really good. And I became really good friends with his kids. And on weekends we go to his house. And I remember after games we go back to his house on a Saturday and like we'd be watching a Bruins game, but in between periods he'd talk about our game. And he'd get on you. He was hard, but he taught you to like what
No
it
way.
means to be a leader. And he would push you a little bit, and it was very black and white for him. But it's something I learned from him was the way he saw the game and how black and white it was, and how hard you have to work and how you have to lead. And being one of the older guys in that team, he always challenged me to be a better leader. But he was awesome to be around and still talk to him this day and be friends with his kids and always poke his brain on or poke around with him of what he likes, what he didn't like when he played, and what coaches he liked, what coaches he didn't like, and things he learned. And he's been a really good supporter of mine.
Wow, what a cool experience. And like so when he's talking to you between periods of, let's say leadership and how to be a better leader, what might have been some of his advice?
Well, I think the one thing was, and I'll never forget, I was on his couch. We were watching in between a Bruins game back in 2007, and for whatever reason, it was just me and him on the couch, and it was midway through the season. We just played a game at UNH, and he really pushed me when I wasn't at my best to still continue to lead, still continue to have an impact on the hockey game. If I wasn't having a good game, I can't let that affect the rest of the group, and my negative body language and negative words affected the group. I had a letter in my jersey to make sure I continued to lead and lead the right way. And it wasn't the smoothest talk. It was more like, this is what you need to do. It was very
Yeah.
direct and to the point, which I liked and probably what I needed. But he was awesome. I remember we lost. We had a really good team. I think we lost one game all year. We lost the second round of the playoffs, and he just came in. And I get goosebumps just telling like he's like, "Hey, it took me 22 years or 21 years, like over 20 years to win a Stanley Cup. It's hard to win, and it doesn't matter the level." And you're seeing it right now in the NHL playoffs how it's a game of inches, it's
Oh
a
man.
game of luck, it's a game of health and nutrition, and I think he went through all of that, and I think he wanted to explain that to us at a young age, and it's just how difficult it is to win, not just in hockey but in every sport. And I'll never forget that speech at the end of that game because we were devastated. We were such a good close group um, to go through that and the emotion of it. To him just to come in and just settle the group and his what he's experienced and how hard it is to win what really hit home for me.
Oh man, I bet. That's unreal.
Yeah,
And
that's
and
cool.
Steve Jacobs was your head coach.
Yeah,
And man, he's been there. I mean, he's a bit of an institution. I know Cushing's certainly well renowned as a place that produces a lot of high end players. Anything you might take from Steve that still is sort of a part of your
yeah.
coaching DNA today?
Yeah, I just actually told a story recently of Coach Jay was the one thing he said to me when I was coming in there, and you talk to players that have played there, and the Keith Yandels, Tom Cody's, Chris Bourques, some really good players that have come out of there. Was Coach Jay always had your back. He always had your back. When any situation in life, he was there for you. And I'll never forget, I had an issue in one of my classrooms with the teachers, the statistics teacher. And we had a big phone call with my parents, the teacher, Coach Jay, um, my dean of admission, and he always had my back in that meeting. It was never he was putting himself with the statistics. He wanted to hear my reasoning for where the disagreement was, and I'll never forget that phone conversation we had and how much he had my back. And it's something that I took with me as a coach. Right now is I have my players' backs, and whether that's with the referees, whether that's with something off the ice, whether that's
Yeah.
them going through something tough off the ice. That's something that I really learned a lot from Coach Jay is just how much he had the players' backs. My nephew's going to school there next year, and he's carrying the
No
tradition.
way.
Yeah, he's a good little player out here, and he's going to go to Cushing and play there. And I think he saw me and my brother go there and play, and you go up to the campus and you see the history of the players that have played there, and it's a really cool experience for someone, and it's a really cool spot.
When you look back on those, that sort of age, so kind of the U18 level, high school age, what would you say? And I mean, you're coming off a really successful run here, where you've been in the East Coast Hockey League, American League, now the NHL. What would you say would be some of the fundamental skills, habits that aspiring players should have once they leave that level of hockey and either go on to junior hockey and or straight to
Yeah,
college hockey?
I would say, and I think this is a big for even just guys that we're getting in the National Hockey League is play away from the puck. When you don't have the puck on your stick, how responsible are you? I think at the end of the day, all of us coaches would say we're putting on the guys on the ice that we trust the most. And you don't have the puck on your stick very often in a hockey game. So when you don't have it, which is the majority of the time, we want to know we can trust you and you're responsible. Are you going to make mistakes? 100%. It's a game of mistakes. But we look at the percentages. 80% of the time, that guy's going to win the wall battle. 95% of the time, that guy's going to be underneath the puck on a D zone battle on the wall, and with 2 minutes left in the game, he's going to chip it out. All those little things, those little details, are really at the end of the day, winning habits of where they're going to take you to the next level. And that's where I see the younger kids, because these kids are doing so many. The skill coaches, there's shooting coaches, there's skating coaches. Okay, that's great, and I think that's really where the game has come a long way from when I was playing and coming up. That we didn't really have the skills coaches and the skating coaches. It was just you went to practice, you practiced what the coach says, and you went to baseball the next day. Now there's so many different avenues you can go down, and things you can resources you can look at. But at the end of the day, the game of hockey is still the game of hockey, and you have to be able
Yeah.
to play without the puck. And I think that's where the next level is going to have to get to, because we're getting players. When I was in the American League, especially, with these really bad habits of play, because they're the best players, say in the OHL, then they get to our level and they're not the best player anymore. So you have to impact the game a certain way, but you also have to be very, very responsible when you don't have the puck, so you can now build coaches' trust. That's what it's all about. Like you watch NHL playoffs, usually the last five guys on the ice with a minute left are the guys that coach trusts the most. I think every coach would tell you that. So I would think that's the biggest thing for the younger generation. I talk to my nephew about all the time is, I want you to go and score and create offense, because that's what scouts and colleges look for. But at the end of the day, you have to be really, really detailed without the puck, because that will get you even to the next level a little bit quicker, but make you a little bit more responsible and complete as a hockey player.
What's the best way to teach that? Like if I came to you, I
Yeah,
said, Ryan, I've got Tommy over here, and Tommy is, man, he's got a great shot. He can, toe drag with the best of him, but he's got no clue what he's doing when the puck's not on his stick.
yeah,
How would you go about building that into his game? Is that on the ice? Is it video? Is it a
right.
combination of both?
I would say it's a combination of both. And I think, everyone's taught a little bit differently. I'm a visual guy, I'm a video guy. I want to see it and I want to experience it. Some people you can use a dry erase board, everyone's taught a little bit differently, but I think the best way to do it, and I think where I've improved as a coach the most as I came up through the ranks was watch the game. Don't watch it as a fan. So you sit down and you watch a playoff game tonight, watch Zibanejad, watch a certain player and just watch every one of his shifts and where he is on the ice.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really good thing. And I tell my like some younger players that I've talked to around this area of watch Patrice Bergeron when he played. Watch Charlie McAvoy when he plays and just playing the actual position. Don't watch it as a fan and waiting for the scoring chances and the goals and Pasternak flying down the
Yeah.
wing. Pick a specific player, whether that's a fourth line guy in Trent Frederick that's playing limited minutes. He's got to be responsible. Try to find someone that kind of compares to who you are as a player, but don't just watch it as a fan. And I think you need to kind of learn and watch the game develop in a different lens at times. I used to being out here watch Bergeron all the time of how smart he was without the puck. How he's always underneath it. Certain times of the game when he could try to make a play, when he can't. So I think those are the things that I would tell this younger generation that's coming up of, watch the game, but don't just sit there and watch with your buddies and joke around during the game. Like kind of focus in on a specific guy that you think has got great details and see if you can pick up some things on just watch it. And then all of a sudden you can go out and practice and try to put it into your game, So I think that would be the number one thing I would say for the younger kid coming up.
So, you mentioned, that was a big part of your development as a coach. I mean, I think you've got such a interesting trajectory where you finish playing, you go back to Curry College, Division III, you're an assistant coach for one season, and then boom, you jump into the East Coast Hockey League as an assistant coach in South Carolina. Which honestly, like, we might need to do a 30 for 30 on the coaching tree that's coming out of there.
Yeah,
That's we'll get into
yeah,
that.
good.
But at what point did you say that, okay, like, I'm all in on this coaching thing, and I'm gonna, whether that's watching Patrice
Yeah,
Bergeron play or anything I can do to invest in myself, make myself a better coach, that's what I'm doing.
yeah. So when I was 18 back in high school, before I went to Cushing, just to go back a little bit, um, my Mike Sullivan was a really close family friends of ours. His parents were my godparents. At the time, he was coaching in Providence, so I would
Yeah,
always be picking his brain and
no way.
communicating with him. So I remember I'd drive down to Providence with some buddies, and we'd go to the game. We'd go after the game, we'd go down to the locker room, and I would always kind of watch Mike. Not so much ask questions, but I would watch him and how he interacted with the media, how he interacted with players, how he interacted with his coaching staff. And then he went up to Boston, and same thing. I would go into Boston in morning skates, and kind of just watch, ask some questions. And, I remember we had one discussion. Never forget it, about some players in his office, and I am 20 years old, telling him I don't think a certain defenseman, I'm not going to say names, couldn't play the game, and we'd have an argument about that or disagreement, and we would talk. But those are the things I witnessed at a really young age. And I remember telling Mike when done playing, I'm like, I'm going to get into coaching. And he said, no, you're not. That's the last thing I want you to do.
Really?
He really tried hard to talk me out of it. He had just got let go in Boston, and he supported me, but he knew it was going to be a challenge. And still to this day, we still talk about it, and how he told me to try to swim me a different way. And but I knew this is what I loved and what I wanted to get into. And I coached one year. I still didn't really know. I wanted to coach. I wanted to be involved in the game. Got the opportunity to go back to Curry and work for TJ Manistersky and an up and coming coach, and just taking over the
Yeah.
program and kind of trying to rebuild the culture there. And that was good. And then, I got a
Yeah.
call
He's
from
done a
South Carolina.
great job in Brock, man.
Yeah.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but yeah,
No,
TJ's
he's
done a
really good
good
recruiter,
lead.
really good recruiter of knowing the players and what it takes to sell a program. I thought he was really good for Curry and for me to learn from too. And I was extremely green. And then I knew the president down in South Carolina, Rob Concannon, who's an unbelievable human being and has been around the game for a long time. And I had known the history a little bit. Obviously, it hadn't got to where it is now. Didn't know Spencer Carberry at all. Kind of interviewed with both of them, and it kind of just happened quickly. It was late in September. Ended up going down to Charleston. Um, and that's when I knew, I'm like, okay, I'm in it now. And, I'm not making a lot of
Yeah.
money. I'm working like I'm crazy hours, and Carbs is a workhorse, and I'm learning, and I'm asking him. I'll never forget at the end of the year, my first year, I'm like, hey, how was it? Let's have our little exit meeting. And he's like, the one thing I thought was really good was you asked a lot of questions, because I was trying to learn. I was in the meetings. I was trying to learn from him and how he communicated and how he dealt with. I remember I had a journal every time we'd have a meeting with a player, because like that communication is so key in today's, today, just in today's athlete alone. So I would on the hard meetings, on the soft meetings, on the time when a guy needed a hug meeting, when a guy needed a little bit of a kick in the butt meeting. I had a journal of the date, the player, what the
No
message
way.
was. So I would that whole year was like I was in a class. Like I just took it all in. And then I started feeling myself and becoming who I was, and molding me as a coach my second and third year, to get me ready to being a head coach. And Carbs, he's one of my best friends. We almost talk every day and he's really molded me of who I am as a coach, and the way I see the game, the way I approach it with players, the way I communicate, the way I teach, because I think teaching and coaching is probably two different things at times. So that he's kind of the one that molded me the most, and it's a great place to coach and learn, and you wear a ton of different hats. I was booking buses and dinners, but you do a lot, and so when you get to the next level, it's like you're working so much, but you're hardly working because you were really grinding back in the ECHL. So those 3 years, and then the 2 years as a head coach, those 5 years in general, were kind of really who made me who I am as a coach today.
If there's like an underlying theme to all this, like I'm pretty sure I've said this on the pod before, but if I wrote a book on how to be a coach, um, chapter one would be keep a journal, and chapter two would be go coach in the East Coast Hockey League. Because I would say those are the
Yes.
two most consistent traits out of all the NHL coaches we've interviewed. It's
Yeah, yeah,
crazy.
it is.
Those
You
two
learn
things.
so much. You see things, and it's funny when I was going through it in those 3 years. Like the bus breaks down, the bus doesn't show up. You hit a deer on the way home. You play the next day. Guys go up. Guys get hurt. Guys retire. Middle of the year, guy goes to. You just go through so many different experiences. Not even as a coach, but as someone that's running an organization that you have to work through, and it's the stories that come out of that league, but it makes you a better coach and better person when you come out of there.
Well, I guess is that part of it too. And and this is top of mind. I saw it on Twitter, which is where everybody should go for like life advice if you're looking for it. But it was somebody had defined, it was on some sports channel, and it was defining, mental toughness is just showing up the same person under tough circumstances. We always talk about players having mental toughness. Is what you just described, like going through those situations, does that provide the thick skin that's required to be a
Yeah,
coach?
100%. And going through like the stress of it, the stress of going through making sure the bus is going to show up. It's on you if that doesn't show up. Going through, making sure the hotels are booked. I mean, that's on like that part of being a leader and being a coach is important. So when next thing you know, when there's something goes wrong in a hockey game or something goes wrong through travel, like it's
Yeah.
just you've been through there, done that. So I think that would be some of the lessons that I learned just in that league itself. But it was important for me to get some chaotic moments, and understand what it takes to get people to kind of unify people when you're going through tough times. The bus breaks down, you're there 30 minutes before the game, the puck drop, and you get 10 minutes to get dressed, and you have a quick meeting and getting all that stuff done and getting your team prepared. It just makes it that more enjoyable too, and you can joke about it after the fact when you get the result. But I've gone through a lot of different experiences, and coming from that league especially.
I bet. Well, you know what, man, I went down a rabbit hole last night. I think if you check my search history, I probably Googled South Carolina Stingrays arena, because I was like, I wonder what kind of
Yeah,
barn they're playing in.
yeah,
And somehow that led me to looking up Charleston. I've never been to South Carolina. Man, what a spot. I had no idea. Like I didn't realize like it's right on the
unbelievable.
water. It's beautiful. Like coming from the Northeast, like
Yeah,
I mean, assuming you were showing up to the rink in flip flops in January, probably the first time you'd done that in your life.
Yeah, exactly. It's an unbelievable city where we loved live. I got married down there. Love that city. My parents ended up buying a house down there. Like my brother, who's going to retire this past off season, has just bought a house down there. There's a lot of NHL guys that are starting to make their way down there and make that a home base. So as far as when it came to recruiting players, from Western Canada to Europe,
Yeah.
wherever, like it's an easy place to recruit. It's just the weather's great. The people are awesome. The food is unbelievable. It's a great place to visit if your family wants to come to town. So, and then the other part of that was the layer of, Washington Capitals and the Hershey Bears of having that really three chain organization, those three tiers they really live by. We've had some really good players that have come through there. And they take it very serious in Washington and being their affiliate. So there's a lot of good things going for that organization. And again, it kind of built me for who I am as a coach. And it's a great city to live in.
You mentioned Todd O'Halloran, who's the owner, and we touched on South Carolina Stingrays have really become, yourself, Spencer Carberry. There's been a long list of coaches that have come up through
Yeah.
that program. I don't suspect it's because of the color of the jerseys. It probably has more
No.
to do with, it's not a mistake. And I think generally, I mean, we just see in the National Hockey League too, like good coaches just for some reason seem to come from really stable organizations. What about that program might you point to say that it was a good place to cut your teeth as a young coach?
Yeah. Well, I think you go from the top, like you said, you have Todd as the ownership, and the Zucker family was before that, and they're still involved. And they're a local family. The kids are really involved in hockey, and then Todd is a Northeast guy who comes down and buys major stake in the team. He really is a hockey fan deep down. He wants to see the team do well. And then the chain of command right under that is Rob Kincannon, the president, who is also another hockey guy from the Northeast that he craves winning and developing players. So it kind of starts, really with him. He's brought all these coaches in, and he knows what he wants in a coach and what succeeds and what does well in that league. And then he sees the coaches go on and have success. So he knows how he thinks it should be run, and there's a consistency to that. And then I think what made it so, like you said, the chain of coaches that have come through there, from Jared Bednar, Cale McLean, Spencer
Yeah,
Carter,
it's
Jason
unreal.
Simmons, who was in Washington as their pro scout and director of minor league operations, is involved and lives there, and he's there a lot. And then I work for Spence, and it's just a really good group of coaches that we still talk. We're in a group chat. We talk a lot throughout the season. When in the off season we get together and try to talk. If we go all down in Charleston, which we try to visit, there's a golf match going on and a conversation over a couple beers after of different experiences that we've gone throughout the year, whether that's Bedsy talking to McKinnon or Carbs talking to and I continue to learn and take it all in and listen to these guys talk and what they go through their seasons. And it's really cool place. And I was really, truly kind of blessed to get, chosen to go down there and work for Carbs and learn and teach. And I'll be forever grateful for that opportunity I got down there.
So when you get handed the keys
Yeah.
from Spence, I mean, he wasn't that far removed from being in the exact same shoes that you were in terms of,
Right.
first time head coach, at the pro level. What advice did he give you at that time? And yeah, how
Right.
prepared did you feel?
I felt really prepared. I think the year before he was going through some interviews and there was a chance he was going to leave. And I was like, oh, I could do it, but I don't know how. I wasn't as confident I was maybe
Yeah.
after the third season. And I remember him just saying, just be yourself. And I've gone through this process of talking to teams from the American League to the NHL and talking about jobs. And I've gone from being an assistant to a head coach, twice now. And you can't change who you are as a person. There's different conversations you're going to have. There's going to be more stern talks. There's going to be more harder conversations, difficult conversations. But the players are going to see right through you if you change who you are as a person. And I'm a easygoing guy to get along with. I can communicate with everyone and talk to everyone and keep it loose. When it's time to have fun, we'll have fun, and when it's time to work, we're going to work. And I think the players that have played for me understand that, and that's one thing that Carbs, when he was, walking out the door, was just be yourself. And you learned a lot, you went through a lot in these 3 years as an assistant coach, and don't change, who you're going to be. So that's something that, I took from Carbs. And again, one thing is he's a great teacher and a great communicator. And I wanted to make sure the players that were coming back were going to see that same, type of mentality and philosophy behind of what we think. So that was important. And going forward as being a head coach my first time around.
Well, so that, year one, you go to the Kelly Cup final, but you break a league record for goals against average, as well as just cumulative goals against for the season. And that's impressive. But when you go on and look at these rosters for a season in the East Coast Hockey League,
Yeah.
like there might be like 45, 50 players that have come through that locker room. And so when I think team defense, I think structure,
Yeah.
continuity, like it takes time and practice to build build the habits. And I'm like, man, that's got to be a real challenge to do when, every time you go on the ice, there's new faces. You're trying to get,
Yeah.
trying to create that connectivity amongst your players. What might have been some of the foundational pieces that you leaned on to allow your team to excel defensively?
Well, I think we had a good core group of guys that were there, that were probably there with Carbs. Again, so the philosophy didn't really change. We believed in we're going to defend really, really well, and we think if you defend, and that's every league, but if you defend really well in the ECHL, you can have a lot of success. And then on top of that, you're the hardest working team in the league. Now you give yourself a chance to win every single night. So that mentality that Spencer came with, and then left with me with, kind of we kept it going. And it almost got ran with some ownership from the players and that core group of players of, this is how we play here in South Carolina. This is how we've been playing for the last 5, 6 seasons.
Yeah.
As how we're going to defend really well. We're going to outwork teams and outwill teams. And that was a really good recipe for success. I think not just in every league, but that league in general, because you do have that league is a league where players want to get out of there as quickly as they can. A lot of the times they want to get to the American League, and how do they do that? They believe of getting points and playing with risk and creating a lot of offense because they put numbers on the board. So if we believed if we could shut those high offensive players down, they're going to start taking more risk throughout the game, and now we can start jumping on teams where we'll get our men rushes because the guy's trying to, in a 1-0 hockey game, he's trying to put it through our legs or make a play that the defenseman has a good gap on at the blue line. We turn the puck over, we go the opposite way and transition to offense pretty quickly. So we had a mentality of wear teams down with defensively, and now those high offensive players in that league, because there's not a lot of them, but they'll get frustrated and they'll start turning over pucks, and we can jump on teams. So that would probably be the biggest thing that the philosophy that I'd taken from Spencer back then, and then it got driven by the players. It got driven by our leadership group of, hey, when a guy came up from whether it's the SPHL or he came back to the American Hockey League, hey, this is how we do it here. So it wasn't just me, with the accountability. It was our assistant captain. If he wasn't back checking, or if he wasn't getting into his battles down low in a one-on-one battle, or wasn't coming back in the defensive zone stopping. It wasn't just being said by me. It was, and that's what defines a great culture. And I thought that was built over years and continued on with myself and when I took the head position there.
So, you have a great run starting out in South Carolina. You go to the finals in year one. You eventually you move over to the Carolina Hurricanes organization with their American League team with Mike Felucci, and in year one, you guys win a Calder Cup. Head coach there, affiliation moves to Chicago. 2 years there as a head coach, you win the Calder Cup. You spoke earlier about it being a game of inches, and we see that in the playoffs right now. In your experience in the success that you've had, what are those key inches that define a team that, lifts a trophy at the end of the year and a team that maybe just falls a little bit short?
I think it's, when you go through these playoffs, more importantly, the playoffs and the regular season is the process of the way you want to play, and the continue to grind through certain times in your season, the adversity that may strike. Um, but I always believe in my team that there's always something that you get to pull out of them. Early in that season in Chicago, there was the competitiveness. I thought we could have been a little bit more competitive, because in the American League, you can get through the motions on a Tuesday night in Grand Rapids or a Thursday night in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
But I want to see the most competitive people come out throughout our whole season, throughout 76 games or whatever it might be. We want to be competitive every single night. The second part of that is we had a pretty, for the most part, a smooth sailing season where we didn't have these 3 or 4 or 5 game losing streaks. We were always climbing the mountain at a pretty consistent pace and how we wanted to play. We'd lose a game, we'd maybe lose a game in overtime, but then we would respond in night 3 of, really grinding one out in a 4-3 win. But I always thought we were lacking a little bit of mental toughness. And what I mean by that is, as these playoffs are going to happen, as we got into the playoffs, I knew bad stuff was going to happen. There's going to be a
Yeah.
bad call. We were going to fight an injury. We were going to hit a post. There was going to be a stanchion goal or a goal off a guy's skate. Like, we were going to go through some tough moments. And we needed to stick together and have some mental toughness to keep grinding through, to keep pushing through. And that's one thing that we talked about before the playoffs started is, we didn't go through these 3, 4, 5 game losing streaks. My first year in South Carolina, we went to the finals. We were grinding, like we were playing playoff hockey in February because we needed to get
Yeah.
to the playoffs. Like, we didn't clinch the playoff spot until with 2 games left. This season, the Chicago season was completely opposite. We were smooth sailing. We clinched in early March. Like, we could have easily came off the pedal. But I remember we went down to Texas and we played so hard and competitive, and we were physical. And I just said, this group is really competitive. They want this thing. But I knew on the flip side of it, we needed some mental toughness because stuff was going to happen in the playoffs. We go up 3-0 against Stockton. We thought we were going to sweep them. We lose 2 games in overtime. The next thing you know, we're going back home to game 6. And it's like, oh my God, if we lose game 6, we're going to game 7 at home. That's when the anxiety comes in. That's where you start pushing, gripping your stick a little bit too tight. So, but we were ready for that. We've been talking about it. We had gone through experiences, even though we hadn't gone to a elimination game per se in the playoffs. We knew something during our journey was going to happen. And this is what was when we hit it right in the nose in a meeting. I remember back in Chicago before game 6, and I remember going through the airport and before game 6 of Nason and Podorowski, 2 players. I'll never forget it. Came up to me and said, "Hey, Wars, don't worry about it. We got it. We know we got it. We got this." Like, they were calm. They weren't cocky. They were quiet confidence, I would say they had. But that was built through the whole season of being competitive, of what we wanted to be as a
Yeah.
team, the journey we're going on, and then the mental toughness before the playoffs started is what we really wanted to talk about. And they were kind of seeing that, and we went through it, and it was good, and it kind of brought some ownership upon their group too. We ended up winning game 6 and going on to beat Springfield. So I just think the game of inches is more so the adversity that you go through in a playoffs and the stress you go through, and you lose a game and it's like, oh my God, we're going to lose a series. It's over. I'll never forget my first year in that South Carolina as a head coach. I was leaving the office. We played. It was best of 5 or best of 7, and we started in Greenville. We lost both games, and we got shellacked both games, like 5-1, 4-0. And I'm like, oh my God, we're gonna get swept. And I'll
Yeah.
never forget, my assistant coach was walking out. He's like, we just can't. Our first year, we just can't get swept. We can't get swept.
Yeah.
We went on to win 4 straight, go on this long run to the finals. End up losing the finals, but we were leaving that office saying we can't get swept. And if you would have said, hey, in 2 months you'll be in the finals against Colorado in game 1, like we would have thought you were nuts. So there's just this toll of emotion that you go through in each and every moment of games and periods and series, and you got to have the mental toughness to continue to push forward and rely on the process that got you there. So it was a really good experience to me, and a lot of fun times in both those experiences and journeys.
Well, you talk about, you go through, a bit of a losing streak. And I think that's probably something. I know we had like Bruce Cassidy was on earlier this year and he talked about like 2 years ago they won the cup and they had I think it was in February, they had a really bad, I think they lost like six in a row. And same thing, he said like that could easily define your season if you
Yeah.
don't put a, kind of stop the flood, so to speak. But when you lose a game, like what's the message to the players, or is there a framework you can go to the team with and say, okay, like we've lost, let's take what we need to take from it, but man, how do you hit the reset button with a group?
Yeah, so I think in the after game, I don't go in there and talk after a loss. Like it's fresh, there's emotion involved. The next morning is when you come with a plan with your staff, and you look at the game as coaches, and you say, okay, these are the issues that we had. Um, sometimes you play really well and you just lose a game. You go up against really good goaltending, so you try to
Yeah.
find different ways to maybe score a goal, or if a team's you try to adjust to a team's forecheck or neutral zone forecheck or whatever that might be within the game. But then you have to have the mindset as a coach of, okay, what's important for the group to see? What is the message for the group? I can't go in there and give them 6 or 7 things in a playoff series that might be important, but it's not really important. At the end of the day, our players at that point should know what it takes to win the playoffs. And now some guys will be surprised by it. The guys would have, not as much experience from it. But as coaches, I think it's important to dummy down, what the message is going to be that day. And sometimes it might be an adjustment with a structure. Sometimes it might be, hey, we just got to do this in front of their goaltender or create some more offense this way. Some of it might be behind the scenes of, guys are getting negative or, and I always say like negativities can be contagious. If you're on the bench and you're getting negative, the guy next to you, all of a sudden it's going to spread like wildfire and it's going to create this
The
bad
Ray
energy in
Bourque
there.
talk.
Yeah, exactly. You have
Yeah.
that bad energy and that bad mojo going on. It doesn't help the group. So I think you got to have a feel and you got to have a plan and process in place to how do you want to approach that, whether it's an on ice structure or it's, the mentality of the group. And I feel like I have a pretty good feel for those moments going through, the final runs, as a head coach and an assistant coach in both leagues. So it's been a good learning process for me too, to see what each team responds to.
Um, you touched on anxiety earlier, and I think this is something that maybe isn't spoken a lot about
Yeah,
in the coaching profession, but um, I think is very real because it's a human business, and I just think of back on the bookshelf here, I've got the genius Bill Walsh's autobiography,
yeah,
and he describes a scene in that book, and I think it was his second season in San Francisco. And I mean, I think at that point they'd won 2 games out of like 24 and they're flying back from a road trip. And he goes, I am bawling my eyes out trying to hide it from the staff and players on the plane ride home. Cause I think like it's over. Like I can't
yeah,
coach. But then he also describes, he goes, it was that anxiety of always thinking about what could go wrong, that fueled him to be just meticulous in his preparation and to anticipate, as you said in the playoffs, like things are going to go wrong. So
yeah,
let's get ahead of it. And that really, it was sort of this double edged sword where, on one hand, it drove him crazy. And on the other hand, it's what drove him to greatness. But there's
right,
a balance there. I'd
100%.
just be curious. I mean, you're a young coach.
Yeah,
Like, how do you deal with that?
yeah. It's funny. So I like that word anxiety because that's a real thing that's going. And today's athlete, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that goes on from social media to likes to Instagram, Twitter, like they're watching that stuff. They're searching their name. They want instant gratification and feedback. And if they don't get a like, that affects them. So we have to have a consciousness to understand that as coaches, of what these young players, especially in the National Hockey League, they go through a lot. Like the Connor Bedards, the Macklin Sullivan, they're going through a lot that happen completely off the ice. So we have to understand that. For me in particular, that's a good question because um, that was something I learned as I got coaching and became a head coach of rebounding from a loss. The one thing I sometimes people ask you what your weaknesses are. My weakness is I take my losses home. I take it home with me, my wife, my kids, and I'm trying to improve that as a coach of not take it home and be a dad when I get home, because it's tough. Like I wear it. I'm a super ultra competitive person, so I wear it hard. Um, and I remember talking to, Rick Dudley back when I was in Carolina. I'm like, Dud, you coached for a long time. What did you do to when he's like, open a bottle of wine. Like, so each guy, and I know I talked to Torts, once, and Torts is like, he goes out and just listens to his cows and his horses and listens to the farm, and just is at peace out there. Like, so all of us coaches try to find different avenues to release and just get away a little bit, because my biggest thing is I have a fear of losing and losing my job. And again, I'm addicted to winning, and when I don't win, I don't get the result. Yeah, I want to dig in more to find out why I didn't get the result. But there's always that little guy on your shoulder saying, like, am I in this for the right, am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good, like, can I not get us
Yeah.
out of this little rut? So I think if you have a good foundation and good process, like I'm a routine based guy and I know what winning looks like, experiencing it. But there has to be a release to, like, you got to let go sometimes, because you can't let everyone else in your life get affected by it too. So that's something I'm trying to get a little bit better at. But it's a challenge. My wife will say the same, I'm sure.
Well, hey, you know what? I'll tell you what. I get I can just about guarantee I'm gonna get a lot of phone calls after this episode gets released. But even just a lot of the pro coaches, like I would say, they are in the last couple of years more and more have become proactive, and a lot of times it's just reaching out to maybe some of the people we have access to that aren't on the coaching side, but on like the performance side.
Right.
And it's just they just recognize like that's, if they're going to invest in one part of themselves as being a better coach, it's not getting a new forechecking drill. It's how to just manage the roller coaster that is a
Right.
professional
Right.
sports season. And speaking of roller coasters, we don't have to dive too deep, but from an outsider's perspective, I would imagine that this past season came with some challenges, just in
Yeah.
San Jose. And um, how I know that there's this, the stuff you put on a wall, you read in books, and it's like just focus on development or just focus on this. But I hear that and I'm like, okay, there's not one human being that's in that San Jose locker room that got to that spot because they could just put winning, you know off to the side and not focus on that. um how did you guys learn to operate within that and stay focused and find some silver linings?
Yeah, it was a very difficult season, and I think everyone in that locker room and our coach's office would say the same. Um, we knew what we signed up for, that it was going to be this rebuild process, and you, to be honest, you talk about it and then you get into it. It's two different things. As
Yeah.
competitive as this sport is, and as you are as people, um, not so much that it changes you, but you have to fight that little enemy of winning a little bit, and you try to push and you try to teach and you try to help players get better individually and collectively as a group. Um, and you got to stick together. We tried sticking together as a group as best we could, from coaches to players, and be connected. Um, but like I said, losing creates some negativity, and you got to continue to fight through and have a process of what you believe in. I try to look at it, and me and Wise would talk a lot about, we would go on these 10-game losing, like, we were going to be the same person every day we showed up. We were going to bring the energy
Yeah.
at practice, in meetings, in individual meetings, in the cafeteria, just making sure guys were in a positive environment and making sure the environment um, was not going to get negative by us. And I thought that was the way we kind of approached it. But it was difficult, like, and it's something I'll probably look back in my coaching career, hopefully 20, 30 years from now, and say I'm glad I went through that and felt it, and learned from
Yeah.
it, and whatnot. But again, it's embarrassing, to be honest. Like, it was truly embarrassing, um, because you're in the National Hockey League, and there's in American League you can kind of hide, in the ECHL you can hide. It's not as more out there in the open with the media. So you have to battle those and ignore that noise, and stay true to yourself. And again, I always believe that everything I've gone through there's a reason for it, and there'll be an answer for it at some point. But um, again, I think it made me a better coach, and continue to find different ways to teach, or different ways to find different sorts of structure with hockey, and find different ways to score, different ways to defend, like just kind of broaden your horizons on being a coach, and continue to fight the demon of winning. And it was very difficult, but again, I think in the end it will hopefully make us better coaches.
Well, man, I love that, you share that, you and Wise, being proactive and having conversations and not leaving it to chance. Cause I imagine showing up the same, like having an ally within the room and almost like an accountability partner to say, hey, like, I'm not going to let you be, the energy vampire, and you can't let me be the energy vampire. We got to
Yes,
show up. That's, I think, how good staffs operate. They have those
100%.
conversations. I'd be curious too, like, at that level, and I know we always talk about it's got to be about the team, makes all kinds of sense. But when you're in those environments, and I think probably maybe just in general in the National Hockey League is part of it when you're working with a player to say, hey, like, yeah, like I want us to be on the same page so you can get better and help the team win. But like, I want to help you. I want to help you earn more money. I want to help you add
100%.
2 or 3 years in this league. And I'm going to be your ally in helping you do that. And
Right.
does that sometimes become part of how you frame the,
Yeah,
getting a little bit
100%.
extra juice? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really, and I use that in the American League too. Of you get to the National Hockey League, you're making more money than you're making here in the American Hockey League. So there's individual goals that I want players to have. I want Fabian Zetterlund to have his goal to be 30 goals next year. Uh, I want Eklund to have 75 points. Like, they should have goals. I want Henry Thrun to have aspirations to be a top four defenseman. I think that's really important in today's athlete. But at the same time, you can't do that without your teammates, and that needs to
Yeah.
be glued into their foundation of this is if you want to get to those goals, you need your teammates. But also, yeah, like from my approach as a coach, um, I want the individual to improve, whether that's from the ECHL to the AHL, the AHL to the NHL, or from going from the NHL prospect to a legit player, from a legit player to a great player to a superstar. Like, there's a process that takes place, and it needs to be a partnership between the coach and they need to that needs to be communication of what their goals are, what my philosophy should be to get to those goals. Now we're always going to be in line and agree on certain things, but that's some things that we talked about through this year with certain players of a younger defenseman. Okay, like I remember Henry Thrun's one of our prospect defensemen. He had 15 games left. You could tell he was out of gas. He was running out of gas, and that's not his fault. It's his first NHL season. It's his first time
Yeah.
playing against like grown men with like in tough circumstances in Calgary one night, Edmonton the next night. He's matched up against McDavid. Like, we're asking this kid to do a lot, but at the same time, my approach was, okay, Henry, like, you believe in yourself to be and play in this league. You're running out of gas. We're gonna have to find some mental toughness and making sure our management and the people that are going to watch are saying, hey, next year this guy's on our team 100%. We don't need to get another defenseman in the summer. He's our guy. So I try to help him push through those battles he has within his own head of like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I can't wait for the season to be over. Okay, but we got to refocus here a little bit and understand that there's people that are watching, and we want to make sure that we're leaving no doubt in mind that you're going to be on this team next year. Because at the end of the day, this NHL it's a result driven business, and if you don't get the result done, and this is your chance, they're going to find someone else that can do the job. So those little things like that we would do throughout the season with players, and that was just one experience that I remember very vividly with Henry. And he's a great kid. He wants to get better and he wants to improve, but he was going through some tough times, which is going to happen. That's one of the hardest
But
positions to
is
play
that
in the
not the
league.
journey of just about every NHL player? Like at some
Yeah,
point, like
exactly.
they
And
start out
maybe that
there. Yeah,
NHL, like Mason Lohrei is playing in the playoff. His journey is a little bit different, but
sure.
in different circumstances, different situations, guys are going through different things, and You got to find certain things that push you forward to get over those little hurdles.
You know, when so you talk about like just like keeping your eyes on players when you watch a game and not watching it as a fan, but like I watch defensemen the majority of the time, and I've like the Miro Heskinens and the Quinn Hughes and the Kale McGregor. I mean, those guys are just they're from another, they're aliens. But I watched the NHL playoffs specifically, and I almost liken it to when you watch like the Rocky movies when they have the montage of like the final few
Yeah,
rounds and they're just beating the snot out of each other. I'm like,
that's what it
that's
is.
what being in the NHL playoffs as a defenseman feels like, where it's just you're just getting going back. Just about almost every puck it feels like is
Getting hit.
dumped in. You got to go back and get it. You're going to get,
Yeah,
somebody's coming for you. How do you create some efficiencies, not just so a defenseman can like make the next play, but they're in a position to make a play 3 games from now when they're on their, it's game 6. They've been on a couple flights and it's,
right.
it's a war of attrition.
Well, I think it's you build that through the year of your habits, and even when you're a young defenseman coming up from the American Hockey League, of creating good habits. I always say like, practice habits become game reality. So if you practice your habits of you're a defenseman and you break out a puck and you have 3 hard strikes every single time in practice, now it becomes muscle memory in a game, and it just happens in a game. And I think that where you see these defensemen from Ekblad and Forslings, where their habits are they're just playing the game, and their habits have already been instilled through the years of practice and years of working on things at the end of practice, and fine tuning some things at the end of practice. It's not so much, hey, they go into game 6 and I gotta make, like, there's probably certain reminders that guys play in their head. I always say, like, have 2 or 3 things in your head that that you lack. Like, I'm sure Tiger Woods does this. The greatest of all time, Tiger Woods, Tom Brady, you name
100%.
them, all do those, mental repetitions in their head before the puck and the lights are on. So I'm sure they go through their thoughts, and making sure they continue to remind themselves of, I want to make sure I surf on the blue line and have a good gap. I want to make sure, I'm shoulder checking on our breakouts and knowing what I'm having a plan and what I'm doing with puck touches. So I think that's important, that you're not just jumping into game 6 of a playoff series. Now we're seeing live bullets and obviously the speed throughout the regular season. And that's on us coaches to say, hey, game 1 in this playoffs, this is going to be a different level. Like, you guys think we've been playing playoff, this is not even close. Wait till you see how fast this is. And some guys, in my experiences in the minors, have been like, yeah, I understand. And then all of a sudden it hits them in their mouth. Like, oh my God, was that quick? Oh my God, is this fast? And it will take them some time, but you can't shut them out the door either. And you have to continue to develop that
Yeah.
part of their game.
Yeah.
You can't just say, okay, well, you're not playing next game. Like, you're not used to the speed. Now, if I see it 2, 3, 4, 5 games from now, that's different. But you got to let the players feel that and taste it and go through it. It's funny. We were in a group chat with our coaches and we were watching that game 7 with, it was Boston, I think. And the physicality, it was like every time the puck was moving, there was a hit. Puck moved, hit. Puck moved, hit. It was incredible, and it's good for players to watch that and see that. But once you taste it, it's a whole different level. It's a whole different feel.
No, and I think it strikes me more now because, I mean, no, I don't want to say the regular season's soft, but I mean, you watch
Yeah,
NHL hockey and there's definitely there's games there's no hitters, and I
yeah,
just think, man, you talk
yeah.
about the intensity ratcheting up. It's a different sport in some respects.
It is. You're right.
Um, Ryan, like one of the, I think if you wanted to be a lawyer, you could have started out and said, "Hey, I'm going to spend 4 years. I'm going to do my undergrad. If I do well in that, I'll do 3 years of law school, write my LSATs. I'll article for a little bit, and then I'll, get hired." And the kind of the framework's kind of mapped out. Coaching's different, right? Like,
Right.
we had Ben Sire on recently, his new head coach in Princeton. And man, like, he's 50 years old, gets his first head coaching gig in the
Yeah.
NCAA. And man, I think a lot of people that know Benny would say that, man, he's been deserving for a really long
Yeah.
time. He's
100%.
earned
No,
it.
Benny. Yeah.
You're a young guy and, you've come up, and I just wonder, like, um, I don't think there's like a magic bullet,
Right.
because everybody's situation is different. But if I called you up next week and I said, "Hey, Ryan, I got to go to an interview for a coaching gig," what advice would you give me? How would you help me
Yeah.
prepare?
Um, I would say, and it's going to be very generic, but just be yourself. I think we go into these interviews and try to change who we are, and then whether you don't get it or do get it, like you still have to be yourself at the end of the day if you get the job. So you might as well show them what you're all about. So
It's good
in
advice.
my
Yeah.
experiences, is like I'm myself. I'm passionate. I'm a motivator. I want to teach. I'm a younger guy. I want to be involved in the development process. So I would just say be yourself. And I think people see my passionate when I just am in a traditional interview. Um, but I think if we change, people see right through you. I've always really believed in that. And I look, I've had some luck along the way. Um, I've taken most of my opportunities to it at times. And the big thing I would say is when I was an assistant, I just stayed in my lane, do my job. If I'm running the penalty kill in the defense, I'm going to stay right in my lane. I'm going to do the penalty kill and do the defense. If I'm running the power play, I'm going to do the like. We get into this habit of always what's next, what's done. I never really um, pushed for a job. I've never um, really hunted a job. I've really kind of let it come to me a little bit. I've always been comfortable. If I was in South Carolina as the assistant coach for 3 years, I was comfortable there. I loved it. Then I became the head coach, and I was comfortable and never looking for a job. And then, Mike Vellucci called me and asked if I was interested. And that seemed, as I did my homework, I didn't just jump at it. I wanted to learn about Mike Vellucci, learn about the Carolina Hurricanes and what their expectations were and what my role was. And I wanted to make sure I peeled the onion back and making sure this was the right opportunity for me and the right step, and I was ready for it. Um, Same thing with going to the National Hockey League, and I talked to some teams after we'd won in Chicago, and some opportunities I was like, what, I'm comfortable in Chicago. I'm going to stay, and I like what we got going there. I'm comfortable. I know who the players are. I know Carolina's players, the prospects that are coming. The opportunity came with Quinny, who I knew a little bit, and Greersy, where it made sense to get some experience behind the bench in the National Hockey League, and but I've never really hunted jobs and pushed and call people. Like if someone thinks I'm important, the best job guy for the job, and I'm interested. But I think that's we as young coaches that are coming up, we always are looking to get to the next level as quick as we can, and players are too. But there's a process to
Yeah.
that, and my process has been a little bit quicker. I understand that, but I've had a process of that. Like I was 3 years of making not a lot of money in the ECHL and grind. Like working for Carbs was really good for me, but it was hard. Like we were in the office at 6 a.m. on July 16th, and I'm sitting there saying, what am I doing here on July 16th? But there was a process to that of me learning how to grind and put the hours in and work and turn every rock over to find more information and get more resources and network. And but I'm not I'm not a networking guy. It's just I kind of have my little circle, and not to say that's not right or wrong, but um,
No.
I know that's not who I am. I'm just not a guy that can just cold call people and, hey, how you doing? That's just who I'm more of a reserved person, and in a setting that I can communicate with other coaches and people, that's great. But um, I've never really, that'd be my biggest advice, is just don't hunt. Just be comfortable where you are. Do the best. Let people find you. Like I remember Michael Connell would say when he was a GM with the Bruins, if you're good enough to play in the National Hockey League, we will find you. And I really truly believe if you're good enough to play coach in the National Hockey League, or they'll find you. And if you do a good job where you are, where your feet are, people are going to ask about you and do the due diligence. And I think that's where you make the jumps to the next level.
If it was in football, for example, like a head coach gets hired in the National Football League, and they'll say, "Oh, like he's a defensive coach, or he's an offensive coach, and is he going to be able to develop the quarterback, or is he going to be able to work with the
Right.
the defensive room?" And I almost feel like hockey's kind of becoming like that a little bit, because there's
A
so
little
many
bit. Yeah.
coaches. It seems like you got to have a bit of a niche to kind of move up. It sounds like you've been more on the defensive side of the bench as you've progressed. Like you mentioned a journal. Like where have you kept like maybe notes on the power play and other aspects of the game that while you're probably in the meetings when they're being discussed, it's maybe not your responsibility in your job description to really handle that. How do you kind of keep that stuff handy for when
Yeah.
you get the opportunity to implement it?
Yeah. I think being a head coach, I've had a lot of different experiences. For sure, I'm more of a defensive, I've been on the back side of the bench for the most part of my career and doing the penalty kill. But as a head coach in Charlotte, I did the power play. In Chicago, I did the power play. So I've got a little different experiences on both sides of that. But the big thing, and it's something again I work with Wise here in San Jose, was he runs the power
Yeah.
play and he's got a great offensive
Good
mind.
buzzing at the end of the year too. Yeah.
Like he's got a really good offensive mind, played at a high level. He sees a game similar to myself, but he sees a game with a lot of creativity. So we sit next to each other on the plane, and he'll show me his power play meeting. I'll show him my penalty kill meeting. He'll get his eyes on mine. He's like, well, if I was the power play, I'd look to do this. He'd show me his power play meeting. If I was a penalty kill, I'd look to do this. And um, the one project that we have, we exchange each other's meetings. So I have all of his power play meetings on my laptop. So my project is I'm going to go through his power play meetings and try to dissect them and look at them and see what I see. And then he'll go through my penalty kill meetings and vice versa. And we'll just communicate that way. So we try to we challenge each other to be better coaches. That's something, just a little thing that, him and I do. And, I'll talk to, coaches in my circle, whether that's Spencer, Carberry, or Carbs, and Bedsy and Roddy a little bit in Carolina, just of things that they've experienced. And you try to, I've always tried to develop the different ways to score. That's a big, topic of conversation. And D-zone coverage is another big topic of conversation in the National Hockey League. So as the summer goes on, you try to you dissect yourself a little bit and like, okay, where do I want to look at this summer of where I can improve? And because I think we constantly have to be improving in looking at ourselves in a different lens as coaches. So, we can keep developing ourselves. And I think that's important. I've always said, I don't have all the answers. I'll tell our players at day one, I don't know everything. I'm going to try to learn and try to help you and improve, but
Yeah.
you may have some that may help me. And I think that's really important as coaches that we continue to improve and evolve. One, with the game that's happening right now and the skill that's highly driven, but today's athlete that's coming up is very unique, and we have to continue to learn from and what they respond to is more importantly.
That's great advice. I just want to go back to Mike Sullivan. I know he was just named head coach of Team USA for, I don't know if it's like, it was the Olympics, right? It wasn't like the
Yeah,
Frozen Face Off or whatever thing they're
I
playing
think it's
next year.
both.
But is it both? Okay.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got named for both. Yeah.
Okay. I think Canada's talking about splitting the roles up, but we'll see what happens.
Okay.
But, Mike is, I've met him briefly a few times. And the two words that come to mind are, he has a presence about him. Like, I feel like he could be a politician or CEO. He could do a
Yeah.
whole bunch of things other than coaching. He's got a
100%.
presence
Yeah.
about him, but he's also just seems incredibly down to earth. Um, you know, after he was done telling you not to coach, did he give you any advice on maybe, because I mean, he's somebody that, man, I
Yeah.
mean, you look at his career, like he could have said, screw this, I'm out a long time ago.
100%.
And really he hung in there. What advice might he have given you, just as, on what to prepare for, or how to kind of navigate, as we said earlier, that roller coaster?
Yeah. Well, I think he his advice was try to continue to develop as a coach. Whatever level I'm at, kind of like what we were just talking about a little bit, is continue to develop layers to who you are as a coach. Um, like I remember we'd sit down. I remember when he was in Vancouver and he ran the penalty kill. He came back that summer, and we talked penalty kill, and we sat in his couch for 4 hours and just went through all of Vancouver's penalty kill and what his beliefs were, and that gave me some of my beliefs. And we talked about face-offs the next summer, and after that we talked about D-zone coverage, and sometimes it would be talk about the business that we're in and how tough it can be and how harsh it can be. And since I've gotten to the National Hockey League, and I've really leaned on him a lot in some of the decisions I need to make, whether that's taking a certain position, whether that's not taking a certain position. And I've leaned on him for that advice lately. And I'm sure towards the end of summer, we'll talk a different system or structure. So a lot of times it's very, direct and to the point of some advice. But he also wants me to experience it for myself. And he's got his own experiences. He went through it, like you said, his own challenges. You know, he was at one point, he was like a Chicago Blackhawks kind of helper, development guy when they win the cup there. And, you know, like wasn't really involved. Then he went to Wilkes-Barre and, you know, to see where he is now, honestly, I could say I probably always could see it because he has so much conviction behind how he sees the game. He can communicate it, and he's very clear in how he wants the game played. And he's like you said, he's got that presence about him, right? So he's a great coach. He's a great mentor for me, but he's also let me grow on my own. And he'll give me his advice, and then he'll state his opinion. And doesn't mean I have to like his advice or agree with him or disagree with him, but it's something he's been through, and he's done a lot of different things in his career. And he's been a really good, you know, mentor for me to learn the layers of the business and layers of the game and what it takes to, you know, we talked, you know, the lot like about the Latangs. He's got the Carlsons. He had the Kessels. He had the Malkin. He had a lot of egos he had to deal with. He had a lot of superstars and dealing with the superstar. And you know, I had that conversation when I went to San Jose to coach Erik Karlsson. And so those are the layers of as a coach as you get to the National Hockey League that is super important, that I have experienced these last couple of years, that you need to really feel. And people tell you, but once you feel that superstar mentality and coaching the superstar can be a little bit more different and difficult. So I've leaned on him heavily for that.
No, that's great advice, man. So you're going to be joining us. Gosh, it's coming up quick here, about 4 weeks time.
I know.
University of Michigan. What are you going to be sharing with our audience? What's your presentation on?
I'm going to do just continuing the development with a defenseman in the National Hockey League, and different layers we add to players' games. We try to work on with players. Just because you get to the National Hockey League doesn't mean you stop, you know, developing. I think at this point, this league is getting younger and younger, and we have to continue to develop the players as they come up. You know, back in the 80s and 90s, it was very like these guys were going out for beers. The next morning they show up and they play and they get their practice on. They move on. Today's athlete is extremely driven. They're probably a little bit more into the video games than they are into the off ice extracurricular activities. Guys will stay out there. Now you have to rip guys off the ice. So balancing that and just finding different ways to layer your game in whatever phase you are in your career is something that I'd like to touch upon at the event. So I'm excited for it.
That's awesome, man. Well, listen, we're excited to have you out there. And before I go, so I want to be a fly on the wall in those coaching meetups in Charleston. So I've seen Spencer Carberry's headshot. I've seen your headshot. I've seen my headshot. I've seen Jared Benner's headshot. Oh. Like, does Jared Benner, when the beer's good, does he ever share his hair care routine? Because if anybody deserves like a shampoo endorsement, it's that man right there.
It's unbelievable. He's got a different hairstyle every six games in the hockey season. I tell him, it's unbelievable. Every time I see him on the TV, he's got a different hairstyle. He's the only guy that's got it going still.
Yeah, I'm losing mine. He's got some people behind him, I think.
Yeah, he does. I think so too. He loves the style and the tight suits, but he's a great man.
No, it's working for him. It's working for him. Well, hey, Ryan, thanks so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate it. Excited to have you out at TCS Live, and all the best this offseason. I know you got some cool things cooking, and we'll best of luck with that in next year.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And definitely looking forward to a little over a month here. We get going here out in Michigan.